All right, well, Heather, thank you for being here. We all really appreciate you coming and sharing your perspective. So now let's just start with the EpiPen price did increase, and although there were other aspects in the system, that was wholly really your decision and your responsibility. And a lot of people are mad about it. So why did you increase the price?
No, thank you, Matt, and thank you for having me. I'll start off by saying it's been a very interesting discussion this morning. And, you know, interestingly enough, a lot around the drug pricing and weighing that value and how it's affecting consumers today and patients, playing that role of the consumer. As regarding EpiPen, we absolutely raise the price and take full responsibility for that. Over the last 8 years, when we acquired the product, we realized that there was a very underserved patient population. There was a real lack of awareness of severe allergic reactions and how to treat them from the physician to parents. There was a lack of access really to appreciating the role epinephrine plays in the role of severe allergic reactions. So we embarked on investing now over the last 8 years over $1 billion in creating access and awareness and improving the product. I think there's been a lot of misinformation out there. You know, a lot of times headlines can get ahead of the facts, and in making sure that people have the information around not only the investment but the results of those investments. Today we reach 80% more patients than we did when we acquired EpiPen. 1 million more patients.
But that also means you're making money on both the volume and the price. I mean, that's a pretty big win-win for you as a company.
Look, it has allowed for a reasonable profit, but if you step back, I think what also has been misunderstood is really the role of Mylan and who we are as a company. You know, we started over 55 years ago really fighting for access to medicine. Today, in the United States, we sell over 635 products at an average price of 25 cents a dose. 1 out of every 13 scripts is filled with a Mylan medication. So our portfolio scans, you know, many of the diseases that have been discussed here today, and making sure that that access and affordability has been our mission since the beginning. And now on a global perspective, you know, today is World AIDS Day, and Mylan medicines touch 50% of the HIV community, both in the developing and the developed world. So, you know, fighting for that access, fighting for affordability has been core to who Mylan is since the beginning.
So let's talk about what value you feel you added for EpiPen with the price increases.
Sure.
You brought some props, so let's start with that. You know,
sure.
This is what you've done with the product since.
This was the product when we acquired it, and you can see where it, you know, looks very much like a pen. There was confusion sometimes about pushing the end that the actual needle is from, and so there was accidents with activating the pen and being stabbed, and then after you use the pen, the needle was exposed. And you know, there's a huge fear of needles, first of all, and there were, again, accidents after use with people sticking themselves. This is the pen that then came onto the market in '09. You can see the shape a bit different, making it more ergonomic for holding, making it very clear what end, and then you never see the needle. So, you know, the idea that there was no advancement in the product was inaccurate. As far as access, as I mentioned, we've reached 80% more patients, so 1 million more people are prepared in the event of a life-threatening situation around a severe allergy. In addition to that, what we realized is that we now know that almost 25% of people who have a severe allergic reaction had never had a previous allergy before. So when you think about that, it's almost like a defibrillator. You need a defibrillator within seconds of when you need it, and you don't know you're going to need it. So we stepped back and realized that not only did it need to be more accessible, but to make that happen was going to require a whole new way of thinking about the product because, for instance, in schools, before we passed legislation, the only time an EpiPen or any product could be used on a child, it had to be in their name and at the school. So, you know, unfortunately, again, we read about horrific accidents, a 7-year-old on a playground in a schoolyard that because there wasn't an EpiPen in that child's name, they weren't able to use one, and she died before being able to be treated for the severe allergic reaction. So reading these stories, you sit back and think, there was a true public health concern about how could we get out there and make sure they were accessible and getting into the hands of people who needed them, even if they didn't know they needed them. So we worked with the advocacy groups, and today 48 states allow undesignated epinephrines in schools, which means that it doesn't need to be in a child's name. And this was really groundbreaking frontier. I mean, there's not products that aren't prescribed in someone's name. And so not only did we work to be able to get them in schools, we then started the EpiPen for Schools program, which has now donated 700,000 pens in schools across America. We know they've been used hundreds of times, those free pens, and potentially saving hundreds of lives. We've continued to also pass legislation that would allow public entity so that an establishment with the proper training could also have epinephrines available that, in a restaurant, again, you read of terrible, even people who have known allergies come in contact with an allergy unexpectedly and perhaps don't have their EpiPen with them. Those unfortunate events could be potentially not happen if there's access. And so over the years, we balanced that access, the innovation of building awareness. A lot of times back, we also found that physicians, there was a misnomer that Benadryl should be the first line of therapy. And I think with a lot of work and working with, a lot of now the allergy community, we've been able to help increase the awareness that really epinephrine should be that first line of therapy if you're having a severe allergic reaction.
Now, you've had you just described a very smart lobbying strategy as part of, at the state level, as part of creating this access, and a strategy for increasing volume. You are, before your current position, you were known as a very good lobbyist. Why didn't you see this coming? I mean, why didn't you see the potential backlash that you could face here as these prices were going up and as a lot of consumers, parents, were walking up to the pharmacy counter and experiencing these price increases themselves?
So look, we got a lot right with EpiPen. We got a lot of things right, but we got some things wrong. And we did not fully appreciate the impact that the speed and the impact of patients, the rise of the high deductible plans, and the exposure that was going to have to a patient walking up to the counter. And again, I think a lot of great discussion today on the fact that we need to have transparency in the system, and that if we're going to, the pharmaceutical pricing system, the current system was not built on the idea of consumer engagement. It was built, you've talked a lot today about the market efficiencies and what's happening amongst the partners in the supply chain, but it was not built on the premise of consumerism and the idea of consumers being exposed or this, wanting them to get engaged in their healthcare, which I think is where absolutely healthcare needs to move. But the unintended consequence of that is now these patients being subjected at the pharmacy counter to a price that they don't even know what that price is going to be when they walk up to the counter. So we can't ask consumers to get engaged and shop for healthcare if there's not an appreciation and transparency of what that is. And I think the panel that was just up here on the insurance side, there's a lot of great discussion about how over the last several years there's been different partnerships between doctors and.
Do you think the PBMs and the PBM system contributed to your price increases? I mean, you've essentially made that argument.
I'd like to, for myself, say I didn't point the finger and put blame on the PBMs. What I said is that there's a lack of understanding of where that full list price goes and how it's divided through the system. And I think there was a lot of misinformation that Mylan took $600, that was what Mylan received. And so in exposing and talking about the system was only to show that there's a lot of pieces in the food chain And there's a huge distance between us making the product and that patient walking up to the pharmacy counter. So transparency would bring that patient much closer to the process. And I do believe the system needs to be reinvented. We need to partner differently. I absolutely believe that if EpiPen had to be the catalyst to kind of show this window into what hardworking families are now facing at a rapid rise in the high deductible plan, and that can create the change that the pharmaceutical pricing system needs to evolve in, then it will have been worth it. Because
what do you think that change looks like?
I think that change looks like starting with, as you think about on the medical side of the house, that evolution of transparency around explanation of benefit, that you appreciate and understand what a doctor visit costs, what each procedure costs, what your plan pays for, what your member rate gets you. I think if we start with that, the transparency from list price until it hits that patient's pocket as they're paying that out-of-pocket cost, I think that consumerism, look, the United States, we're the best shoppers in the world. We want the best product for the lowest price at the highest quality. But the only way you can really be a consumer and shop is if you know what something costs, you're able to also put a value-based judgment on that, and that drives that natural supply and demand. Unfortunately, the pricing system, I've been at Mylan 25 years, and the pricing system hasn't changed much over those 25 years. The role of from discounts to rebates, there's been evolution in some aspects, but it has not reinvented or kept up with who we are today, how we want people and patients to engage. And, again, I thought a lot of interesting discussion that innovation is coming from a lot of places. It's not just in a laboratory. Innovation about how a disease state evolves, how we need to treat disease states. We're learning every day in this world of data, and I think that that's all a very important point to bring. And again, I think the more we can have an educated consumer walking up to the counter will make the industry better, it'll make it more efficient, and I think it'll continue to incentivize innovation.
Now, a lot of CEOs in the branded pharmaceutical industry like to say that you're another outlier, kind of in the series that started with Martin Shkreli and continued to Valiant. What do you say to those people? I mean, you do R&D, but you didn't do a ton of R&D, throwing R&D back into anaphylactic shock. What do you say to those people who say that you're just another example of a bad actor in the system?
Look, here's what I would say is that is not who we are. And I think that we've got a real opportunity now to show who Mylan is and the role we play in the U.S. healthcare system. As I said, 1 out of every 13 prescriptions filled in this country is filled with a Mylan product. And we've worked for 55 years to bring access to affordable medicine. So I would say we are a very different company. Our business model is very different. And making sure there's access and fighting for not only building and investing in high volume, high capacity, but we do spend a tremendous amount in R&D. If I look at, we've spent $600–700 million this year in investing in bringing new products to the market. I mean, we have about 240 products pending at the FDA. We have invested hundreds of millions of dollars to bring a generic Advair to the market. So, the level of investment, and we have invested over years. So we're not the company that bought a product, raised the price overnight, and not investing. Our business model has not been just taking old products and raising prices. Our business model has been investing in, we have over 2,000 products globally, investing in innovating around dosage form. I spoke of HIV, our HIV franchise. We have 50 products, and we work to innovate about different dosage forms for pediatric population because, obviously to dissolve a tablet as parents try to make sure their child's compliant, trying to make sure that there was heat-stable products in sub-Saharan Africa because refrigeration is a problem. So affordability is one part of the equation, but making sure that product gets into the hands of people who need it is the other part of the equation. So it can be as affordable. You look at HIV treatment today, it's very affordable, but that's only if it's in the hands of the people who need it. So
let's go to a couple questions Anybody want to ask one?
Hi, Don Diamond, City of Hope. So considering all the good works you did in the HIV field, and we know that the epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa is really where the action is, and I think that's very laudable. Why'd you ruin it with the EpiPen? I mean, what you talked about in terms of R&D probably cost a couple $100,000 to take it from one type of a pen to another. I mean, I do research and development, and that can't have cost that much money. But if you then expose this to 1 million people and raise the price as far as you did, you actually, what you did was take all of that goodwill and destroy it. So what's the answer for that?
Well, look, I think the answer is that it's when people realize and are able to understand what we have invested in. So it wasn't a couple $100,000. I mean, this device has 15 critical components in it that have to work every time and inject medicine within seconds of a patient needing it. So I wouldn't undermine the importance of how this device works and the need for all of those parts to work every time. As far as the investment, as I said, in innovative ways of creating access and awareness, we've spent over $1 billion over the last 8 years. So that investment was real, and we believe it's produced significant results. Like I said, touching 1 million more patients, knowing that those free pens have been used hundreds of times, potentially saving many children's lives across America. And we want to do more. We want to make sure every school has access. We want to make sure that we continue to educate and public entities can have it available as well, because as I said, 1 in 4 allergic reactions happens in somebody that had no idea they had an allergy prior. So the public health concern around this issue and our desire to meet that unmet need. And so yes, we were constantly striking that balance. So I believe that, you know, our company is rooted in a solid, deep foundation with core fundamental values and a mission statement of providing access to more affordable medicine for our patients. And we will continue to do that, and I believe that we'll be able to use this as an opportunity that more people will understand the role Mylan plays in not only the U.S. healthcare system, but the global healthcare system.
Now, you fought very hard on device drug pairings in asthma to get real generics there. You've also arguably benefited here that there isn't, it's very difficult to make, you can't really make a generic EpiPen because of the device. You can make a competing device, but you can't make a generic EpiPen. Do you feel any tension there between the two sides of your business here?
No, you know, look, I think as many pharmaceutical manufacturers, there's many different perspectives, and the products all have a very different profile. I think when talking about EpiPen, what we have argued for is that you need to be trained if it doesn't work the same. The FDA guidelines are if it doesn't work the same and you have to be retrained, it's not substitutable. And so, you know, look, we work within those guidelines as we bring many products to the market. And, you know, for safety reasons, you can imagine when you're faced with a severe allergic reaction in yourself or in your child, or if you're a caregiver and you're accustomed to how a pen works, you need to be retrained if you're now given a different device that works differently. So, you know, all that we have argued for is just from a safety perspective to make sure that they work the same and that you're not putting a patient in harm's way by them being confused about the administration.
Another question? Anybody want to say anything? No? Yeah?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. A lot of the price increases around products are around the actually multi-source products. In your case, actually, you've benefited from a couple of products failing, Teva product not being approved. Now you're on two sides of the business. So the question I have for you, there's a lot of pointing to the backlog of the FDA for generics. Do you feel that that needs to be addressed, that that's part of the problem, and that the FDA is too slow in their approvals and doesn't have enough capacity there?
So I have been a huge champion for GDUFA, which was the user fees that generic companies now pay to level the playing field from one quality standard around manufacturing and accelerating the approval process for generics. What I would say, if I get two sides to this coin, on the EpiPen perspective, it's really not about the lack of competition. There's been 4 devices out there with epinephrine, so there's other options around the delivery of epinephrine. So I would say that it's not the competition around the price. This was very much, like I said, we were driving
Well, but
awareness
why
and
don't you
access.
think that those other competitors, I mean, some of which were similar, ever gained much in the way of market share against you?
I would argue we've had a very good product and continue in investing in the product, and that access and awareness, again, I think showed we have a good product. But to your point, there's absolutely been competing products in the market. But as far as generics are concerned and that driving that competitive landscape, like I said, I've been in this business 25 years, and it is a very competitive landscape. But to maintain that competition, that flow of approvals, especially around complex generics. And that's where we've really been trying to invest and partner with the FDA about setting guidelines, whether you look at the insulins, being able to bring a generic insulin, a generic Advair, biosimilars, which I know also have been discussed, and I'm sure will be more, the burden that's going to have on the U.S. healthcare system. If you think about the role that generics play, 90% of the volume of all prescriptions dispensed are with generics. And we heard Steve from Express Scripts say that that's where the answer lies in that competition. We need that same robustness on the biosimilar side. I don't think the market is going to evolve the same way. You're not going to have 10, 12 players on entry. But I can tell you we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars. We'll have invested billions of dollars to bring the broadest portfolio of biosimilars to the market. So the FDA being able to partner and lay out guidelines for some of the real complex products is where I believe the system, the patients, the U.S. healthcare overall will benefit the most.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, Heather.
Thank you.